almost is ludicrous that there are people who are suggesting that it's irrational, and as if I'm advocating irrationality by suggesting that part of what makes humans unique is their ability to deal with what is not the case. Humans have a concept of zero. The advent of zero in the history of mathematics, to people who are unfamiliar with it, they should go bone up on that a little bit. I think they'd find it very interesting how important zero is for all of the kinds of modern calculations that people do. I think the point about what is the difference between humans and other creatures, we want to admit that humans are animals. We're somehow continuous with an evolutionary development. We're products of all kinds of pressures, of evolutionary processes, of selection and of mutation. But none of that alleviates us from the duty of being rational. And to me, being rational is looking around and with open honesty trying to admit when and accept when there are differences that make a difference. I think it would have to be someone who is utterly irrational, who is going to deny that humans are different than the bulk of, if not all of, the rest of the creatures. To say that we're different, it's not to suggest that we're better. I don't think that's the claim. But if you look at the cumulative effect of all kinds of differences that we can see, it has everything to do with historicity. Can an animal mispronounce a word? I think there's sort of an odd way to get at that. I mean, do animals have languages that they learn? We sometimes hear people say that way. People talk that way. They say, oh, animals have language. So like when your dog is talking, it's like, it's barking out Labrador. Is that the deal? People who think that way, this is part of the problem. If this sort of cursory understanding and glances at understandings of language. People who have never really studied semiotics, they don't know the difference between a language, a natural language, an artificial language, how languages are related to sign systems, how sign systems pervade the natural world, but they're not language. To suggest that they're language is to have a gross misunderstanding of what a language is. Languages are historical. Sign systems are ontogenetic. They certainly do have a historicity to that organism, and you can speak of an ongoing memory that's part of an organism's sign system, but they don't have historicity as part of their sign systems. They don't have, properly speaking, negation or self-reflexivity. There are rudimentary forms of that in sign systems, but the more you're going to try to get at what language is, the more you're going to have to deal with. Part of what makes language unique is its ability to handle, in fact very deftly, what is not the case, to be able to speak about what's not the case. And now to say that it's an impoverishment for people to simply accept literalist, simple-minded, I would call them actually animalistic, fearful of death sort of responses, clinging to a dogmatic truth, when in fact is no one has any idea. There's a big fireball in the sky, and there are animals running around eating each other. Does any of this mean anything? To say by fiat that it doesn't mean anything, that's just a fearful animal trying to do an authoritative disambiguation. The fact of the matter is no one knows. And it's not to say agnosticism is the point. The point is that humans are awkward in existence, and part of that awkwardness comes from the ability to say what's not the case, to live in the world of what partly isn't the case. And the point of this is that it's irrational, that if there is irrational, it's the person out there who can't accept that humans might be different. Could it be the case that there are some differences that make all the difference? When does a difference of degree become a difference of kind? Those are the critical questions. It sounds as if someone is caught in old Aristotelianism, a sort of pre-Darwinian notion of form, where they're unable to recognize the emergence of new forms in nature. And I think to suggest that all purposes are somehow given by that, it's sort of like it's a kind of cloaked crypto dogmatism. And a lot of this is addressed by religiosity. In fact, if you go, there's a wonderful book here. I'm sure many people are familiar with this, but Corpse and the King, this was a book that Joseph Campbell had edited, and it's of Heinrich Zimmer's work. Now, Heinrich Zimmer, he tells this great story of, the goddess who's there on the throne, right, with the third eye, and this monster comes in and is going to steal the bride, and then the third eye opens up, the lotus of command, and it conjures up this wildebeest, sort of creature that's going to devour the monster, and then the monster says, give me mercy. And Shiva says, okay, go ahead, be gone with you. And then this conjured wildebeest says, what will I do? When you made me hungry. And Shiva says, yeah, you did. And Shiva says, yeah, well, you will eat yourself. And then the monster gets down and it starts chewing and it's chewing and it devours itself, right, until it's nothing but a face. And as the face is sitting there on the palace floor, Shiva leans back, laughs, calls it the face of glory, and says, this is the epitome of what life is. It's a huge conjured beast, and it's so big and it's so hungry and voracious that it devours itself in order to stay alive. Yeah, this isn't an original thought. This is an old Indian myth, and it's the Oberos myth, where you have a circle of a snake, and the snake is eating, quotes, its tail, but it's not the tail that the snake is eating. It's that the snake is a mythical creature, and it represents the fact that death is the food of life, that the snake sheds its skin, and that what it's eating is the shed skin, not its actual tail. And so this symbol of the snake eating its own shedded skin is this sort of the way that death is the food of life. None of that, though, says that there aren't other purposes to that. To say that there's one and only one purpose to life, how tragic, how unimaginative. Is this really? I mean, it may well be that other animals are almost caught in the inability to make art, to create new religions, to dance in possibilities, but it would be a horrible misunderstanding of the biodiversity on this planet to suggest that all animals on this planet are caught with such prefigured and preset relevancies. Humans aren't. Part of humans, and this is part of the truth. It's irrational to avoid this. It's very irrational to deny how humans are different in this regard. Humans are able to talk about how things are not, and this is it's a wonderful thing. It's beautiful. We can have music. We can tell stories, and it's not to say that we shouldn't have science. Of course we should have science, and I think science often requires belief and imaginative leaps and creativity, and that's part of what we think of. I think if you go talk with scientists are committed to increasing their worldview, and that worldview is to include all of the facts. If we want to be honest about all the facts, I think the more that you talk with semioticians and people who really study language and people who actually study science systems, they're going to suggest that yes, language is a kind of mystery. And it's not the only thing that makes humans humans, but it is something very significant. And people who haven't really thought about language, they haven't thought about that much when they're trying to think about what it is that makes people people. And at the very least, I think people want to accept that language does have the ability to talk about what's not the case. That's part of the world that we live in, and it's irrational. If there is anybody who's being irrational, it would be people who don't want to admit that there's at least that distinction. Let's haggle about that one for a while. Okay, thanks.